Welcome back to Better Than I Found It, the podcast all things college golf. This is Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor, and your host today. Joining me today on Better Than I Found It is 1981 Open champion Bill Rogers, truly one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. And as you'll discover, there's also an incredibly competitive side to this Texas golf legend. He and I talk about his rise in the game and his unlikely first conversation with legendary Houston golf coach Dave Williams, which led to a scholarship offer within minutes. Bill recants his memories of his college teammate Bruce Litsky and their years together on the PGA Tour. He also talks about his brother, Rick Rogers, who was a former Baylor golfer, Rick's influence on his game and his life. He describes burnout, which eventually led him to stepping away from the game. And finally, we delve into his faith life, the most important thing in his life, but it wasn't always that way. I truly enjoyed this conversation, and I know you will too. Okay, Better Than I Found It listeners, let's all welcome 1981 Open champion Bill Rogers to the podcast today. Hey, Bill, thank you so much for joining me here on Better Than I Found It.
Oh, Mike, good to be with you, and privileged to be with you. I would mention that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to start by saying this, and Mikkel is included in this. Mikkel, my associate head coach, he's only 30 years old. And honestly, his generation and younger just doesn't know who Bill Rogers is. And I know that's crazy, but they don't, Bill.
Yeah. How refreshing.
Well, anyway.
But I understand that world. Yeah, it's good. It's sobering, humbling sometimes, but it's good that we can share with the younger group.
Well, and it's understandable. You know, you retired long before pretty much all of these guys were even alive or playing golf, certainly. But I want to introduce you to that generation, guys my age and guys from my generation. I'm a little younger than you, not much, but we know who Bill Rogers is and we remember that time. Okay, so that's easy. But this next generation, so I'm going to say this right from the start, and you can't argue with it. It's my opinion. You're not going to argue with this. Okay, you got it?
Will do.
All right, so this generation needs to know from 1978 to 1983, you were the same type of player. Now, I'm not going to compare you over eras. I'm just saying in your era, you were the same type of player as a Jason Day or an Adam Scott or a Jimmy Walker. You won a major, you won multiple other events, and you were one of the top players in the game for 6 years. Are you going to argue that?
No, but I appreciate the love there. Yeah.
Well, but that's what I wanted to kind of give this generation who's listening to this podcast. So you're actually listening to Adam Scott or Jason Day or Jimmy Walker in this interview. It's like that's what he was of his era. And your era had some pretty good players, if I may mention Jack Nicklaus and Tom Weiskopf and Lee Trevino and Tom Watson. I mean, it was a great era of players for sure at the top of the game, and you were right there with them.
Well, I would like to say, and I do say often, I really feel like, and this is no disrespect to current generation or those to come, those not too long ago, but I think I played the game, was able to play the game both amateur-wise and professionally in the very best of eras. And some of those that you mentioned, certainly, but we got to touch some of the professionals that really developed up the professional game. We got to see from time to time, certainly Byron Nelson and Ben Hogan, not that they were still active competitively, but then the Charles Cooties, Dale Douglases, the Bruce Devlins, those meat and potato professional types that had been playing the tour quite a while when we showed up on the scene. But we were able to see that group, and then certainly the Nicklaus's, Palmer's players, Tom Watson, who were still actively competing when I was playing. And then I probably left the game before certainly the Tiger era showed up, but just got to experience some wonderful times in the amateur and professional game. So for that, as much as anything, I'm grateful.
Yeah, you spanned a lot of different careers. One, Greg Norman, Seve Ballesteros, and Nick Faldo were all
top players when you were still playing.
Yeah,
And
played a lot with them, and
yeah, absolutely.
and
So
and just got to experience some wonderful years with them. Yes.
yeah, one thing this generation doesn't know, Sam Snead, who was way before your time, actually shot his age 2 days in a row at Quad Cities while you were still playing. I don't know if you were playing that week at Quad Cities in '79 or not.
I wasn't, but yeah, I would have or skipped over his name. Yeah, he was still, I think maybe in the uh, up into his 60s, was still competing hard, and he was phenomenal physical specimen, actually, of which the golf world would know. But yeah, people like Sam was still hanging around when we were playing, and Crusty Sam, man, he he was still mad at him.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So that gives this generation who might be listening to this podcast a little perspective, when you played, how you played, that type of thing. And what I'm going to tell some is a little known fact. Most people don't know you were born in Waco, Texas, right here in Waco, Texas.
Sweet Waco, Texas. Yep, that's where my grandparents lived. My father was in the Air Force. I think you might be getting to that, but that was home base for us, and long kind of Baylor background. My dad went to Baylor, my brother and his wife and niece. We have a lot of Waco ties in regards to home and the school, Baylor. But yeah, that was Baylor big and Waco, a big part of our growing up. Our early years.
I'd like to go back in time. Otis Beck, the golf coach from 1953 to 71, he got your brother Rick to come to Baylor. If he could have just figured out a way to get Bill here, it would have been something.
He was awfully close. He did recruit me, and there was quite a good chance that I would have gone to Baylor had Coach Williams not kind of offered me a scholarship to come to U of H, of which I certainly wasn't deserving. I didn't have the credentials to go there, but had he not done that, there was a very good chance that I would have gone to Baylor.
Well, it's good that your brother Rick was here, and about 2 months ago we lost your brother last year. Rick passed away, but one of the things we did here at the Billy at our facility was we honored him by planting a tree, and four of his teammates, Bob Ricks, Jim Martin, Sam Boyd, and Ben Hagans, joined you that day. We dedicated the tree back in November. So Rick is a big, big part of this program.
Well, you forever indebted to you and Baylor and the golf program and everyone else involved for doing that. And I think that's, doing the well game. What the name of your podcast is? Tell me one more time.
Better Than I Found It.
Better Than I Found It. I think that's one of the additions that makes that title ring true. So you've honored me and my brother, and I'll never be able to thank you enough.
Well, you're welcome. You're very welcome. But so your dad was a military guy in the Air Force. So you traveled around a lot. The parts that I know about are Morocco, Germany, maybe Birmingham, Alabama. But you finally ended up in Texarkana. How'd you end up in Texarkana?
Yeah, after the world tour in many places in the United States, having been stationed there, Dad retired in Texarkana, Texas. He had a good friend that he had gone to cadet school, flying school with, and he had moved to Texarkana and got in the insurance business. And he convinced my father to, upon retirement, to move there. And we packed up, and that's 1963. I was a 12-year-old and came to Texarkana.
Yeah, good spot. Actually has produced a lot of really great players. It's got some great golf courses, kind of a sneaky, really good golf town in the history of golf. And Byron Nelson was once a head pro there at Texarkana Country Club. I mean, so that a lot of history in Texarkana.
Right. And Miller Barber as well.
Yeah.
Miller was from there. And then I know we'll get to speaking about him. My mentor coach, Jerry Robinson, that was his hometown as well, who was arguably Miller Barber's best friend. And, they ran the streets together, played the tour together back in the 50s.
Well, so two early influences on your golf before we ever get to going to the University of Houston and playing pro golf and everything would be one, Rick, your older brother, and the other would be Jerry Robinson. So give me the best thing that Rick ever brought you in your game, and then we'll talk about Jerry right after that.
Well, the high note of that for him was that I never beat Rick. I can tell I could beat a lot of others, but I could never beat my brother. And he was a tough competitor. That's all there was, and he had a huge psychological advantage over me. He knew how to touch my buttons, but he I was able to learn a lot from him and just watching him. But he was a phenomenal athlete. He played all the sports, was really a good athlete. And as well as that, my father was a very good player and played a lot competitively in the Air Force. And so I was naturally brought into the game by watching them and hanging out with them. And the very first time I picked up a golf club, it kind of fit. And I loved the game, fell in love with it immediately. And it was just a good natural fit. And then Mr. Robinson, as I always called him, I didn't call him Jerry, I always called him Mr. Robinson. As we joined the country club where he was the golf professional, heck, he took me under his wing really at a young age and began to kind of form me into a first golfer and then ultimately a player. And it was a special relationship.
Well, Jerry, there's a great story that I want you to kind of talk about, and that is he would play matches against you, but he didn't play you for money. He played you. He made you work in the golf shop when you lost to him. That's a great. That's a motivator.
Absolutely. And I was strung up so tight, Mike, as a young player, junior, young amateur. Well, I was so intense and, like I said, hot headed, and man, he knew how to touch my buttons, and I did. He would call me a slave. And, when he beat me, I owed him hours in the golf shop, picking up the range, putting golf carts up. So early on, I knew what it tasted like to lose and what it was like to win. And when I beat him, he took good care of me. Let me put it that way.
Well, and he actually trained you, because I know when you were playing golf matches against your peers, you made them do yard work. The yard work you hated doing, you actually had your peers, instead of paying you money, they had to do yard work.
That's exactly right. I hated to mow the lawn worse than anything, and I'd probably almost cheat to win. So, man, I was highly motivated, no doubt about it. And I was thinking, I think that's where you heard the phrase, I hated to lose more than I like to win. I'm not even sure exactly what that means, but when I dissect that a little bit, I just hated to lose so bad. And, and certainly in the career of golf, we're going to lose a whole lot more than we win. But huge motivator for me. And I was Mr. Robinson with his little gamesmanship tactics and whatever. He made the game very fun, but he made it challenging for me. And he brought me along and trained me well.
I love that. And it's similar to what Earl Woods did with Tiger, just always trying to get under his skin and give him a hard time and unnerve him, so that later when he was a professional, he wouldn't be so unnerved.
No doubt about it. You have to learn how to deal with adversity early on. And I'm not so sure I dealt with it well, because I could be a little pill. I was not a good one to be around after a losing or not doing well. But we took that as well and learned how to deal with it. And as much as anything, Mr. Robinson or anybody that's teaching, if they can make the game fun, I think that's a key ingredient to bringing along a player.
I absolutely agree. One other thing before we leave your early development, you were one of the last players to play without a glove. And I don't know if you ever did use one, but I never saw a glove on your left hand. Was that his influence? Whose influence was that? And why did you play without a glove?
Well, I was certainly in a minority, and I really can't even answer that, Mike, except that I think that as I developed, my golf game was developing. I just had, I think, one of my strong suits, really good touch, and it just felt like might as well have a baseball glove on my left hand as a golf glove, but just really compromised the touch, and so I never really fell in love with wearing a glove, and I never did wear one.
Yeah, I just remember. I mean, my sort of golf hero when I was a kid was Jack Nicklaus, and he used a glove, and Lee Trevino used a glove. And so all those players that I was looking up to when I was watching golf on television all used a glove. And when you came along in the mid 70s, you didn't have a glove. I always thought, how does he hold on to that golf club? But you did. You held on to it quite nicely, and unless you got mad and threw one.
Oh, shoot. I'm capable.
Well, anyway, you guys end up in Texarkana. You went to Texarkana High School, and somehow or another you get to University of Houston. You alluded to it earlier. You didn't feel like you would have been a top recruit for Dave Williams. How did he recruit you there? And then I want to ask you about him. I just think he's an intriguing figure in the history of college golf.
Well, he no doubt was, but he had met my brother. He had met Rick along the way. Houston and Baylor ran up against each other from time to time. He liked my brother, and at the time, Mike Mitchell was playing at the University of Houston. He was from Texarkana, and he had mentioned to Coach from time to time, "Hey, there's a little young junior up in Texarkana you might want to keep your eye on." And I don't know how intently he did that, but the fact of the matter is he kind of knew of me. And the 1969 U.S. Open was at Champions, Orville Moody's U.S. Open. And Coach had heard that I was caddying in the Mike Mitchell arranged for us to have a caddy job at the Open and at the U.S. Open. So Coach had heard about that, and after one of the practice rounds, he was out there, and he somehow or another got a message to me that he would like to visit with me on the back patio there at Champions Golf Club. And I found him, and we had a nice little discussion, and heck, I was who I was. And he went over that he knew my brother, and certainly that Mike had informed him about me. And we had a nice discussion, and heck, I got up, and he offered me a scholarship to come play. He had never seen me hit a golf ball. And in about a 10 or 15 minute conversation, he decided that, he'd just honor me with a golf scholarship. Of course, at that time, it certainly wasn't like today. You could give as many scholarships as you could raise money for. And so it wasn't like that it was, he had a number of scholarships to give away. So anyway, arguably the best golf school in the country at that time. Of course, Oklahoma State, Florida, Wake Forest were in that mix as well. But U of H was at the top of the heap. And golly, I couldn't tell you how quick I jumped at that opportunity. And Coach extended quite a faith move there in asking me to come, but I'm fortunate I did accept.
Who did you caddy for that week at Champions?
There's a fellow named John Levinson. He was a club pro from Chicago.
Okay.
And I'd mentioned that we were unsuccessful in playing on the weekend.
Well, I caddied in the 77 U.S. Open at Southern Hills, and I caddied for David Strawn, who played a little amateur golf when you did. I think he was runner-up to Craig Stadler at Inverness in 1973. Sure. And I'll never forget that week. We missed the cut by a shot as well. So anyway, okay, so you caddied in the 69 Open. Dave Williams offers you a scholarship. You are at the University of Houston. I mean, a juggernaut of college golf. It was unbelievable, winning a national championship almost every year. What made Dave a great coach, and did he have any influence on your development as a player, as a person?
Well, everybody that would have known Coach Williams would have said that he was different. He was a little different coach. He was a different type guy, but he had the he was very persistent in his recruiting efforts. Golly, I don't know of anybody that in my era that he didn't recruit. I mean, he would call and send letters to anybody that could spell golf, I think. uh, but he was able to identify anybody that had any uh, golf talent at all, and at least get them to consider coming to U of H. And he was a tremendous promoter. He loved Houston. He loved his city. He loved the school. Um, he just had a knack of identifying good players, and had no reservation whatsoever in and getting them to come and at least consider Houston. And with the groundwork already laid in their success, it was attractive to consider coming. And, if you had any tour aspirations whatsoever, you knew that it was a good training ground for that step in moving with an opportunity to maybe play the PGA Tour. So he had quite an attractive program, but he was he didn't have necessarily a perfect regimented rhyme or reason to his qualifying system to who he would choose to go to tournaments. And he was quirky. That's the word. He was very quirky in the way he approached college golf, but he had a lot of strong opinions about how he ran his program, and obviously he was quite successful in doing it. He really didn't. I don't think he knew a whole lot about the kind of the fine works of mechanics in the golf swing, this or that, but he made it work. And I'll tell you what, you were he motivated you, and if you had every opportunity in the world to progress because he had so many good players there.
He definitely had competition. He used that as a tool for sure because he had tons of players. One of those players was a longtime PGA Tour player, Bruce Litsky, who was one of your dear friends, and we lost Bruce a few years back. Truly, this generation today has no idea. Bruce Litsky was an absolute treasure in the game of golf. Talk about Bruce. He called you the Panther. I want to know why.
Well, he did. He was as good a friend as I had. I walked in the door with him as a freshman at U of H. First time I'd met him. Really didn't know that much about him. Of course, all of us were kind of in awe and idolized Crenshaw. But Bruce, I hadn't heard that much about. But we immediately identified that we were kind of kindred spirits. We liked a lot of the same things. And he's just a sweet man. And heck, we spent an awful lot of time together, certainly at school, but playing amateur golf, and then into the professional ranks. We were together a whole lot, and ultimately our families, just were as close as two families could be. And I don't know, everybody got a nickname at school, as you well know. I'm sure that holds true for all golf teams current day. But Bruce kind of called me the Panther. I've always been kind of jumpy, and I get hard to sit still. In fact, they bet me that I couldn't sit still on a couch for 1 minute and sit perfectly still, and I couldn't do it. And so anyway, from there, the Panther kind of stuck a little bit, but that was probably a good nickname, but it wasn't. Buck is the one that stuck with me.
Buck
that
Rogers.
Was kind of what everybody in the golf world knew me as.
Yeah, that's what I called you, was Buck. I didn't know about Panther, but I found out about it later. So in 2002, when you played in the Liberty Mutual Legends of Golf with Bruce, and you guys came out as victorious that day, that had to have been like one of your highlights of your career.
Well, one thing it really was, because he had to basically not play in the event, the champions event itself, the match or the individual play, the medal play, and he elected to play in the division of best ball. And heck, he was just playing so well, and I was along for the ride, and we had the best time and won, and that's always good to win. But he was very, very, to concede that to play with me in that, of which we enjoyed tremendously. And in fact, it ended up changing the ultimately that format of that tournament, because everybody else knew that we had such a good time, and we loved to play best ball together. And so anyway, that was a cool time to spend a few days with him.
So Bruce Litsky, if I can give these kids, young people that are listening, a little perspective, and thank you for that story about playing with him in that tournament. But one year as caddy, they were playing, I guess, in the last tournament of a season. And in those days, you had about 2.5 months off. And the caddy said, "What are you going to do over the break?" He said, "I'm not doing anything." And the caddy, he just couldn't believe it, because every year in January, he would come out playing great. And you're thinking, you had to practice. So the caddy put some bananas in his head covers and then zipped up the travel cover. And when the travel cover shows up on the West Coast, caddy gets it. I'm afraid I don't know the name of the caddy, unfortunately. And sure enough, those bananas had rotted over the winter. He hadn't hit a shot. Is that true?
100% true. Al Hansen was the caddy.
Al Hansen.
I'm almost positive I knew about him going to put the bananas in his travel cover. And then I'm positive I was there on the unveiling of the unzipping of the bag in January. And there they were. But I can 100% attest to the fact that when he zipped them up, he put them in the laundry room. We went and visited him. He lived at Grand Lake of the Cherokees, up in Oklahoma, kind of a remote set. But when he put them in the laundry room, I can see him right there next to the washer and dryer. He would not touch a golf club until he came back on the West Coast. And shoot, yeah, there they were up in the woods.
And he won on the West Coast. I mean, he won a few times out there. So it's like he had the game of golf. And so I bring up that story for a couple of reasons. One, there's different ways to become a great player. And he finished runner-up in 2 majors. So it's not like he didn't compete in majors as well. He was a great player. But there's different ways of doing it. And he owned his golf swing. Once he found his golf swing in the early to mid-70s, he never changed it. And nowadays, everybody, if you shoot a 74, you want to change your golf swing. And I'm thinking, he had it right. He knew his golf swing and he owned it.
100% right. I couldn't say it any better than that, Mike. He was probably the most strong-minded person I'd ever been around. And he was going to go down with what he had. And, first and foremost, a tremendous talent. Just from the day he picked up a golf club, he could do it. And he just was not going to tamper with it. His brother would occasionally maybe give him a little heads up on, a problem or whatever, but never tampered with it at all, and would run from a video camera. I mean, he didn't want to see what it looked like. He didn't. And but as strong-minded as he was, he played the game one way, left to right, and of which obviously his success speaks to that can work, as did Kenny Perry the other direction, hooking the ball. But Bruce had what he had, and he could miss 5 cuts in a row. It ain't going to change him one bit. He's going to show up for that 6th event and stay with what he got and the way he played, and very successful. Good way to do it.
Well, I'm not sure I can convince anybody today that it's the way to do it, but there's certain truth. There is some truth in there that it's like, if you own your swing, you're better off than that guy that's changing something every week and having to call an instructor every time he hits a bad golf shot. It's like, no.
Well, you mentioned a lot of ways to do it, and certainly that's the truth. There's some guys that are highly technical and cannot, they can't play without knowing every little detail. So a lot of different ways to do it.
Absolutely. Well, okay. So by 1975, you'd established yourself on the PGA Tour. By 1979, you won in Europe, the World Match Play Championship. That really got you rocking and rolling. But I'm going to say from 79 to 83 or 78 to 83, I think you had 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 top 9 finishes in majors. In 4 U.S. Opens, you were 4th, 10th, 2nd, and 3rd. So, I mean, you are one of the better players. There's no doubt about it. And you've established yourself as one of those players. In 1981, you had like a ridiculously good year. And you won at least 4 times on the PGA Tour. You won the Open Championship at Royal St. George's, PGA Player of the Year. So, and by the way, you just finished, I think, 3rd in or 2nd in a U.S. Open. So it's like you had arrived. And I know that must have felt good. But let's talk about Royal St. George's, because it was a major championship and they can't ever take that one away from you. Talk about that week.
Yeah, it was a special time. And, we play the game to possibly run into those kind of stretches. And, I had my time in that, kind of the 1981 was like catching lightning in a bottle. I mean, that's the long and short of it. But, it just doesn't happen, just kind of, there's a lot of, if you just keep playing, you just don't know what might happen. And having finished second to David Graham a month earlier in the U.S. Open at Merion, I was fully confident. And I've always represented, give a athlete some confidence and you might see some special things. So, I never showed up at an event, certainly not a major, kind of, I'm going to win. This is my week. I never was in that lane, but I knew I was playing well, had a huge amount of confidence, and it just carried over. And I loved links golf. I thought Royal St. George's was difficult. I liked, seemed like my career showed that I liked difficult golf courses, and heck, it was a magical week. The first 3 rounds, I'd built up a 5-shot lead going into Sunday, and had a hiccup or two on the front 9 that last day, but was able to pull it together and ended up winning by 4 over Bernhard Langer. But there's so much that goes into a defining career moment, of which that was for me. But my life as I knew it changed dramatically after I held out there on the 72nd hole. And heck, it was wonderful. There's nothing like winning. And then to win a major is and kind of that environment was just unforgettable. And it's there's hardly a week that goes by in some form or fashion that I'm not reminded of it. So it was special.
Well, I just reminded of it just now because I never heard you talk about it. All the times you and I have talked and had lunch together or been at a golf tournament together, I've never asked you about it. So it's finally able to do now. But so that got you on the Ryder Cup that great year. You were on the Ryder Cup team that year. As I recall, that was a really, really good Ryder Cup team.
Yeah, arguably that was as much a highlight. Hoping the Royal and Ancient didn't listen in, but that was almost as much a highlight winning the Open Championship. But interesting about that is, I was their Open champion a month earlier, and then September they weren't all that fond of me on the U.S. side. But arguably the best Ryder Cup team ever put together, beginning with Nicklaus and Watson and Trevino and Johnny Miller, Ray Floyd, Crenshaw, Litsky, Jerry Pate. I know I'm leaving out a Larry Nelson, the giant killer, but it was unbelievable to be in that company for a week and in that setting, and then to have played for one of the all-time great gentlemen in golf, Dave Marr, as captain, and just a special week, of which every time I see Dave Marr, his son, Dave Marr Jr., it just brings back such tremendous memories. But that was to have played on a Ryder Cup team, and certainly that one was just a cherry on the top for my career.
Yeah. Well, I by the way, I'm going to show you a copy of this Golf World magazine. Do you have that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
you do have a copy of that. It's for those listening, it's the 1981 annual, and it says Bill Rogers rocketed to new heights, and it's a caricature of you, and it's got Buck Rogers on there, and there you are on top of the world. What a great year that was, and culminated in a major championship and the Ryder Cup. So I would say that's the high point of your career, and probably most people would. But let's talk about the rest of the 1980s. So the next year, you're in the hunt to win a U.S. Open. I mean, at Pebble Beach, and there in those days there couldn't have been very many golf courses that were more challenging to play than Pebble Beach was in the wind. You're playing the final round on a Sunday with Tom Watson, arguably the best player in the game at the time. And you had to watch one of the most famous, iconic shots that's ever. Most people don't know you were the playing partner that day. Yeah. Talk about that moment at Pebble Beach.
Well, that was a tremendous U.S. Open, and Watson and I were tied starting the last round. In fact, I held the lead through 9 holes that last day, and then kind of the heroics began. And I could tell you that he was certainly the best player that day, and I don't say players. I don't say this often that players deserve to win, but he played to win and certainly not to lose. And there's a big difference because he'd had some real setbacks in majors and U.S. Opens prior to that. And man, he just came out on fire. And I loved playing with Tom Watson, played with him a lot. And he was so aggressive the last day. And he had a few great breaks early in the round, but as you move fast forward to the 17th hole, he had put his golf ball. Nicholas was in, and I had to finish birdie to, as it turned out, to have to be able to tie, but I obviously didn't. But he had a pretty decent shot into 17. I think it was either a 1-iron or 2-iron. We played the whole long, and he got in a kind of a funny little spot behind the green there. And, I guess that I didn't hear Bruce Edwards, his caddy, and him talk about, I'm going to make this, but darn if he didn't. He had as good a little chip shot as you could hit. And, it did hit the pin, go right in the hole. And, but he was capable. And, he had such a tremendous frame of mind playing the game of golf. I often tell younger players that there's nobody that's played the game probably with a better attitude than Watson. Always felt like the great breaks were going to go his way, and he would have had no feeling whatsoever that he wasn't going to hit a good shot there. And he knocked it right in the hole, and like arguably the most watched golf clip of any that's ever come. And but anyway, and then played the 18th hole, made birdie there. So he was a deserving winner that day, and it was a privilege to have been in the conversation for a little time that day. But I'd have to tell you one little side story. My dad, because I was playing well, left Texarkana and drove and came to Pebble Beach, came and arrived early morning Sunday at Pebble Beach. My wife and I were having breakfast in Carmel. My dad shows up, and of course we hug, and gosh, it was tremendous that he had made the effort to come all that way. He sits down and he looks at me and says, do you know that if you win today, you're going to be the national champion of 3 countries? And I about threw up. I about threw my eggs up. He said, yeah, you'll be the Open champion, you'll be the Australian Open champion, and you'll be the U.S. Open champion. I said, Dad, God. And of course, as fragile as competitors are, I mean, I'd have preferred not to have heard that. It didn't impact me one way or the other. But gosh, I started off the day having to deflect the thought of that.
Well, that's actually a story I've never heard, never seen it written down anywhere. So that's kind of amazing. It wasn't what you needed to hear or wanted to hear right there, but you played great. You played well all day, so you were still in the hunt.
Yeah, I played well enough. I certainly did. And then, I had birdie chances really kind of the last 5 holes, but, like I said, it was, as you're able to reflect back, it was really Tom's time to win. And he made it happen with a brilliant chip on 17.
Yeah, not very many players can say that three of their majors, Nicholas was the runner-up, but
Yeah.
Tom Watson can say that. I think Lee Trevino, Nicholas was runner-up 4 times and
Yeah.
So a lot of people, and you mentioned it early in this podcast, that want to say that today's generation's better players, but not the top players are no better today. I don't think the
No.
very top players were amazing.
I think it's hard to start judging eras, but they are what they are. The game thankfully came in threes with, as far back as Snead, Hogan, and Nelson, and then player Nicholas Palmer. I mean, and then Tiger had his own era unto himself, and uh, every era holds its holds its own for certain.
It does. Well, so you won one more time after that. You won in 1983 at the USF&G, but self-admittedly, in the mid 1980s, you were just burnt out. So talk about the burnout. How did it come about? What was the major contributing factor to a burnout?
Well, I got fat and happy. Let me put it that way. I mean, kind of the world at my feet and long-term commitments, and I could see the financial benefits laid out in front of me, of which, I was I paid attention to that, but I also got complacent, Mike, and with my golf game, and kind of the more success you have, you're able to manage your schedule a little better. Which I was not a great manager. I had people do that for me, IMG, and they created a lot of opportunity for me, and I didn't turn down hardly any opportunity. I traveled the world, and I love the almighty dollar, which that was definitely an obstacle, as it turns out. But I really, the flame kind of began to flicker, and ultimately kind of went out, and I just had kind of lost the desire to work at it, to be great, to maintain that kind of level, and began to notice that it just wasn't as important to me as it once was, and had a young family coming along in the mid '80s, and that's a huge factor as a tour player. And it wasn't any one thing, but it was several things that began to lead me toward walking away from competitive golf.
Well, it's understandable. It also makes it so amazing when you think of somebody who plays the game competitively at a high level till they're 55 or 60. It's like, wow, they really have a lot of motivation. How do they do it?
Unbelievable. You look at a Langer, or really even, there's been a lot of them that have continued, Jay Haas, Fred Couples. It's what they do. They love it. And I'm not saying I fell out of love with professional golf, but and I think we're going to get into a faith part of this, but I think God, made it very, very apparent that there was going to be another aspect, another chapter to my life other than professional golf.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, to me, it's the best quality that Bill Rogers has. I mean, and it's something you didn't earn, but is your faith. It's something that I've always noticed about you, always appreciated about you, and it's the most important thing in my life. So talk about faith and how it's affected your post golf life.
Yeah, well, I'd come to faith on the tour. The tour Bible study, they meets on Tuesday, and that's how I met the Lord. And I considered him and him the Lord of my life, my Savior, for about 2 weeks, and then I was on fire. This was 1976, really early in my career, and was kind of on fire for the man, and quickly was able to see that the lure of the tour life was going to trump my faith life. So I kind of put God up on the shelf for a while, and he allowed me to kind of stumble through my professional golf life. But it wasn't really until I left the tour that I recognized that my faith journey, moving from a life of really kind of success, of which he anointed, giving me the ability to play the great game of golf, but then moving into a different phase of life, of which an author of a book that's been meaningful to me, Bob Buford, wrote Halftime. And, he as well had a life that moved from success to significance. And, as I left the tour and began to get my feet underneath me in a new kind of set of life, a new way to look at the next chapter of my life, that book really rang true for me. And I thought it was well to serve the Lord and look at moving toward a life of significance as opposed to success. And it's been the most meaningful chapter or part of my life, definitely.
Well, and part of that coincides with the fact you weren't playing professional golf anymore, but you were raising children. And so the faith had to be really important to be a leader for your family.
I can tell you, my wife she had grown up in the church and was very instrumental, played a mighty part in this next chapter of my life. I'll never forget. We're settled in, got our two children, and she says we're going to get involved in the church. We're going to take our kids to church, and so the first day of Sunday school, we drive up, and I'm acting as though we're just going to drop the kids off and we'll come back and pick them off. And then, my wife said, no, that's not the way it's going to work. We're going to Sunday school ourselves and church. And that was an aspect of the beginnings of my faith journey, but some tremendously important people stepped right. God put them right in my path at the most important time. Jim Barker, Jim Hiskey, important people that had long been into their faith journeys and committed to serving the Lord. And they began to mentor me and bring me along. And so forever indebted for them.
Great to hear that. Yeah, all of us have had mentors, and all of us that are fortunate enough or blessed enough have had wives that have pointed that. My wife, Pam, has been exactly the same. Anytime I get so involved in being a golf coach, she reminds me that, I'm a Christian first and not a golf coach. So sounds like to me, your wife, same thing.
No doubt. And you've got to have the fellowship aspect to a faith journey is so important. And I just look back in awe of, who's been involved in my life along the way, and a lot to be grateful for.
Well, I feel the same way about me. So later, after you'd been a club professor, director of golf for a long, long time, and I know you were still playing some golf, not competitively speaking, but you became the assistant coach at Texas San Antonio, UTSA, for John Knauer. Talk about that. That's how I got to know you pretty well. And I really always talk about that experience.
Well, you know what that to some degree is like. You had your going from the top of the heap at Oklahoma State and then moving into an assistant role with Jay
Sewell,
Jay Sewell at Alabama. But I don't think there's anything in the golf world that I haven't done. And after tour golf and the director of golf at the country club, and then having moved to develop up a golf club, but then kind of had a time away from that after a partnership had fallen apart in that phase of my life. And the athletic director at UTSA asked if I'd like to come and be involved with the golf programs, both men and women, at UTSA. And they had just hired John Knauer and Kerry Parnaby. And I said, I think that I would, I'd love to do that. And John had long been coaching, and he had been, I guess he'd come from Arizona to UTSA and accepted that job. And Kerry, who had played at Tennessee, was coming into leading the women. And they were just perfect in accepting me for who I was, and hoping that, and I was hoping that I could, to some degree, help them in whatever aspect I could, having been exposed to, professional golf and amateur golf, the whole works. And it was really it was a good marriage to some degree. And heck, I enjoyed it. The opportunity as you still enjoy being able to speak into young men and women's lives. I think it's a high calling business, whether you're head coach, assistant coach, but if you have that opportunity to be able to have an audience with a young man or woman and be able to, give them some maybe wisdom or some of the things that have been impactful to your life, then I think that's that's a pretty good place to be.
It's a really good place to be. And so when you talk about parenting, you talk about being a teacher, talk about being a coach. There's an old quote that my cooperating teacher, when I became a school teacher, 35 years ago, told me. And I coached high school golf and was a teacher for 9 years, but he told me this. He said, 100 years from now, it won't matter what kind of car you drove, what your bank account was, or how big your house was, but the world will be a better place because you were important in the life of a child. I never forgot that quote. Don't even know who said it, but this guy gave it to me. And it works for parenting, it works for teaching, it works for coaching, all very, very important positions. And you did an amazing job with John, and it was very quiet and understated, but I could tell the kids respected you when you were at UTSA.
Well, nobody's done it better than you, Mike. I appreciate that coming from you. I really do. And I walked away and had the opportunity many times in speaking engagements to mention to people, I'm not so sure there's not more of a high calling business than coaching. And you just have the opportunity to spend so much time and having lived so much life, you're able to really give back in a big and meaningful, impacting way. So, and I truly mean this. Nobody's done it better than you in the coaching world. So, thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. So, I've got a couple more things I want to cover before we're done. I really, again, appreciate you spending an hour with me here. But your style of player, okay, kind of shortish, not that long off the tee. Good short game, great putter, sort of maximized all the gifts that God gave you. You're that kind of player. Let me give you some others that were like that. Corey Pavin, Jeff Sluman, Willie Wood, Fred Funk, Calvin Peete, Scott Verplank, David Edwards, Mike Reed, Curtis Strange, Nick Price, Tom Kite, Bernard Longer. So I just named a few that I thought about this morning before this interview. None of those guys would overpower a golf course today, not one of them. Okay. So I say that because that was kind of the player you were. And my question is there hope for a kid like that today that he could figure out a way to play professional golf, kind of playing like those guys?
Yeah, that's a tremendous question and framed out nicely. I would have to mention, Mike, that I know when I played the game, and certainly even before me, but I can tell you that length has always been an incredible asset in the game. I'm telling you, the Weiskopfs, Nicklaus's, the people that could really hit another gear when they needed to, they benefited so much from length. So it's not like modern day golf has just kind of arrived at long, length and the long ball. But I'll tell you, from golf course setup to how the game has evolved, I'm not saying that, there's still room for that hot competitor. And, all competitors that have reached any level of success have burned hot. That's just the way. And that's one of the real personal traits that you have to develop up, is how to manage that run, the hot competitor, and making that work no matter how you play the game. There'll always be those that, maybe play less than the power game, that are going to be able to make their way. And you're always going to have some of the traditional golf courses that still allow some of the, medium length type players to succeed. But I'll tell you what, if I was the czar or given the magic wand with a student or a group of people, I'd teach power. I really would. And from what I understand, I don't keep my finger on the pulse of the game so much now, but I understand there's a lot of modern day instructors that that's just part of the deal. And from the physical training aspect, I mean, you don't have to be a beast to develop up, great flexibility and strength to be long. And so, with all the factors involved, I would highly train up somebody to kind of in that respect of the game to use everything we can to be long. And but I still believe that there's going to be the style player that is able to succeed no matter what. They're going to figure out a way. Yeah.
Oh, good, good. There was a young kid that came to my golf camp a couple of summers ago, and he was 5'6", probably weighed 110 pounds. And I watched him swing the golf club beautifully all day long in this camp. And at the end of the day, I said, "Hey, tell me this. How do you never overpower a golf course? Everybody you play with and compete against hits it further than you do. How do you overcome that?" And he kind of looked at me with a puzzled look on his face, like, "What are you trying to do? Tell me I can't play?" But he didn't say that. He said, "Well, coach, I can't do anything about all those things you're talking about. I'm just going to maximize me."
There you go. Yeah.
And I thought, well, okay, he gets it. And by the way, he's a wonderful player, and he's going to play college golf starting next year. Can't mention his name, but so I'm going to read from a 1981 article written by Jim Moriarty in Golf World about you. I'm going to read this paragraph, and then I'm going to ask a question that I've asked almost every guest. The thing about Bill Rogers, the most impressive thing about his game, is that he has never stopped improving. Not yet. He's learned to be good enough to beat his friends, to beat his brother Rick, to beat his teacher, to play college golf, to be an All-American, to play in the Walker Cup, to play on the PGA Tour, to win on the PGA Tour, and finally to win the British Open. He's probably already played better than half of the people who have played with him ever thought he could, but he hasn't played as well as he figures he can. So do you remember that quote or that article?
He was one of my favorite writers, by the way. Jim Moriarty, is that who it was?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
He was as fair as anybody that came down the pike, and I'll forever be indebted. That's very kind to him to reflect that way on my career. But I don't know. I just fall into the category of being one that's grateful and that heck, and it wasn't, there was a lot of ups and downs and all around, a lot of hurt and a lot of tough days. And I just had so many good people around me and encouragers. And but I was I was intense. I was tough inside, and I could smile and be the good guy maybe before and after, but I wanted it awfully bad. That's one thing you can never x-ray or know too much about on the inside, the want to. And I wanted it so bad. I was motivated. I wanted to be my friend so bad, so much so that one of the really low parts of my competitive career was when my friends played bad, I felt better about myself. I mean, that's as ugly as I ever got. That was kind of a soul sick, that'll bring you to faith real quick. But man, I loved playing well, and kind of had the style game that I could keep it out in front of me. Didn't play with a lot of mistakes. I mean, I wasn't playing foul balls kind of golf. I just, putted, pitched well. I could, I don't know. I kind of could keep it under control, and felt like I was usually pretty much under control.
Well, based on that article by Jim and what you just told me there, what would be your best advice for a 14-year-old who wants to play college golf and then play the tour today? Just a piece of advice you'd love to give any 14-year-old that would help him.
Well, first of all, love the game. You play ultimately because you love the game. Compete hard, do the best you can, trust the results. No, don't panic. The game seems it's going to be usually harder than easier. I mean, it's full of obstacles. It's you're gonna fail more than you're gonna succeed. It'll be life's great teacher. to you. It'll teach you more about life than about the game itself. Don't panic. Surround yourself with great friends, great people, because the game of golf can, in itself, it's inherently hard, and you can be around people that can develop sour attitudes pretty quickly, and misery loves company. But be real intentional about surrounding yourself with winners and people that are on your side. Don't panic. It's not like you wake up and you've lost everything that you've worked for. Just ride out the low spots and be grateful for the highs, and just be grateful that God gave you the ability to be able to play this great game.
Very, very well said, Bill. Thank you so much. And honestly, just thank you for spending an hour with me today. This has been really refreshing for me, and to talk to a major champion for one, but one I really respect and like a dear amount, and somebody who was one of the players I looked up to when I was in high school, college, and shortly thereafter. So thank you again, Bill.
Mike, you're the best. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, have a great day and keep after him.
Will do.